So, in our opinion, the number one rule in private practice management is don't die. I have a few key points that I'm going to go through that I think that after you listen to this video, you may think twice about buying equipment simply to avoid paying a larger tax bill. Let's get started. Anything that contributes to you dying as a practice, anything that contributes to you being forced to go out of business, we try to avoid. And we try to amplify the things that strengthen the practice, that strengthen care that you provide to your patients, that strengthens the workplace environment that your staff comes into every single day. This advice is well-meaning. This advice, there is no malice behind this advice when people give it to you. But ultimately, when you look at the details of it, it could very much harm your business. And that advice is to buy medical equipment, to make capital investments, to increase CapEx solely for the purpose of avoiding paying taxes. That's what we're going to dig into today. So let's start with the pros. So we're going to try to address both sides of this, right? The pros. Why would you want to make a capital expenditure toward the end of the year that would raise your expenses, lower your profits, and thereby lower your tax liability? Well, the thinking goes, if you make a huge purchase on a piece of equipment and it lowers your tax bill, now you get this equipment that you wouldn't have got before, and you don't have to pay the tax bill. And so the taxes that you would have paid kind of offset by this new piece of equipment that you now have and the taxes that you don't have to pay. And I'm sure there are many circumstances where this makes sense. But the thinking behind it is driven by the fact that it's better to give money to an equipment manufacturer or buy some piece of equipment and use it for your business as opposed to just giving money away to the government, right? I've been told that many times. I mean, you're just throwing money away for taxes. Why don't you just buy this piece of equipment? So that's the pro argument to making an equipment purchase for toward the end of the year to offset your taxes. You're going to pay less in taxes. You're going to get a piece of equipment that you'll then be able to go out and make money on. But let's talk about some key points on why this may not be the whole story. Number one, if you're making a purchase for a piece of equipment toward the end of the year to offset taxes, the question you have to ask yourself is, how much do you really need that equipment? Because if you truly needed that equipment, you would have probably already purchased it without needing the tax incentive, right? Like, you're not going to need a piece of equipment for 10, 11 months and then get to the month 12 and say, oh man, I've been needing this equipment for so long, so now I'm going to buy it because I'm going to get a tax incentive. Maybe you were putting this purchase off, you know you needed to do it, and so now you're incentivized to do it by the tax benefits, and it encourages you to do that. But the question you have to ask yourself is, are you simply trying to avoid taxes, or are you making a high-quality business decision where you're going to get a return on your investment? So that's the first thought process. Do you really need this piece of equipment, or are you simply buying it to avoid taxes? Number two, as the owner of a private practice, every dollar that comes out of your practice that goes to anyone else, you have to account for it, and it has to make financial sense. And so when you're buying equipment, just like any other piece of any other capital investment that you make, you want to get the best deal possible. You don't want to pay retail if you don't have to, and you want to get a high quality piece of equipment for the lowest possible price. Well, one issue is when you're buying a piece of equipment to forego paying taxes or to lower your tax bill, it incentivizes you not to get the best deal, right? Because the higher the price on the item that you're buying, the laser that you're buying or whatever, the more tax liability it reduces. So it almost plays this trick on our brain to believe that by spending more, I'm saving more. And, I found that that can be a trap. Unless you're like placing a bulk order on products that you're getting a big discount on and that's selling very, very well, the idea of spending more to save more, I haven't found that to work out well for how we run our medical practice. Another key question you have to ask yourself is this particular purchase in line with your overall business strategy? For example, if you're a private practice and if you're a dermatology practice and your main bread and butter is general dermatology, you're doing skin checks, you're doing biopsies, you're entrenched in general dermatology and that's what you do. And you say, but if I buy this laser, then I can get these tax benefits and it opens up all of these other services that I can provide. That may not be the right strategy because if your niche is general dermatology and it's working well for you, it may not necessarily make sense to purchase a piece of equipment that's outside of your, not necessarily your scope of practice, because it may still be in your scope of practice, but everything that's in your scope of practice may not necessarily be your strategy. It may not necessarily be your sweet spot or what you, or your bread and butter. And so you want to make sure that if you're going to purchase a piece of equipment, that it's in line with the goals of the practice. It's in line with the strategy of the practice, exactly what you're trying to accomplish at that moment in time. Because one thing that we had to learn is we cannot do everything. We realized that if we try to provide every service, sell every product, that we are diluting our messaging. We can't be all things to everybody. And so if we don't want to dilute our message, we have to be laser focused on the things that we want to focus on. And for some practices, lasers may not be the thing that you want to be laser focused on. Lasers may not be in your scope, in your strategy. Again, not using the word scope of practice because we recognize if you're a dermatologist, this will be in your scope of practice. But it may not necessarily make business sense. And also, the market that you're in may not necessarily demand those services. Another key question is the equipment that you're purchasing. What is your long-term plan for this equipment? Meaning, what do you see this equipment? What role do you see this purchase playing in your practice 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because most likely, if you're going to make a purchase that's going to have any kind of impact on your tax situation, it's probably going to have to be a big purchase. Most likely it's not going to be a $5,000 purchase or a $10,000 purchase. That's not going to have a big, huge impact on your taxable income. The extra $5,000 expense is not going to change what you're going to owe the IRS. So when you start talking about tens of thousands of dollar purchases or even potential six-figure purchases, then you probably want to make sure that that purchase is something that you're going to be able to use over the long term. And the issue with in the medical tech space, so much is changing. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, how certain are you that this equipment that you're purchasing now will be relevant 2 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years from now? Because there's a possibility you could purchase a piece of equipment that no one wants to use in the future. And then a major question is, when your accountant or your business advisor or whomever, your colleague, your friend who went to medical school, who also owns a private practice, when they recommend that you buy a piece of equipment to offset your tax liability, you have to dig deep and make sure that you're considering all of the costs that comes with the ownership of that piece of equipment. So, for example, have you factored in the cost of marketing that equipment? It's not a guarantee that just because you buy a new laser, just because you buy some new machine, because you buy a sculpting machine or all of the different things out there that people are just going to flock to your door. You're still going to have to market that. You're going to have to, market it on Google, market it on Facebook, do some different things to be able to get the word out for that. And so that is part of the cost of ownership. Have you thought about insurance costs? If you're going to get this expensive piece of equipment, you're going to have to insure it. And you're going to want to make sure that you think about the cost of insuring that piece of equipment as you go. Another thing is you have to think about training costs. And even if you, as the provider, are trained in this piece of equipment, you may need to take some time to brush up on your skills, and you may also need to train your team. And even if you have an owner, even if you have the salesperson or whomever is selling you the equipment, they say they're going to come in and train people on it, it's going to take time. And the cost of your staff on the clock being trained is also a cost that you need to consider. And even the cost of your time as the doctor providing these services, or training on these services, that cost also needs to be considered because as a doctor, you have the most expensive hourly wage in the entire practice. Also, another thing to consider is, have you factored in the cost of potential liability? Meaning malpractice issues, or if somebody gets harmed by this piece of equipment. Listen, uh, most likely most of these pieces of equipment are going to be safe, but if the equipment has powerful technology behind it, like lasers, it can harm people. People can get burned. People can get bruised. People can get, people's skin could blister. And you want to factor in, how will this impact your medical liability? How will it impact your liability insurance? Some insurance policies, just for the fact that you are now purchasing this new piece of equipment, your insurance rates are going to go up. Let alone any future claims against that insurance policy. So that's something that also has to be considered. And lastly, have you factored in the opportunity costs? And by opportunity cost, I mean, what else could you have done with that money that you use to buy that equipment, or that credit that you use to buy that equipment? See, money and credit are limited resources in your private practice, right? And so every time you are using money or you're using credit, you have to also think through, what else could I have used this money or credit for? Could you have used that money to pay down debt? Could you have used that money to invest somewhere, even outside of your medical practice? Could you have used that credit to, borrow and do something different besides buying a piece of equipment? These are the kind of questions that can easily get missed when people are just thinking about avoiding taxes. And so, to sum up, I believe that you want to figure out a way to pay the lowest amount of taxes that are legally that's within the realms of the law. There's no sense in giving money to Uncle Sam for things that you shouldn't have to give it to. But you can get in trouble when you're trying to avoid taxes and doing things in your business that may not necessarily be beneficial to your business, but is simply lowering your tax bill. Ultimately, if your practice is going to become more and more profitable, the goal is to pay more and more taxes. Because if your tax bill is going up every year, then you know that you're earning more income. And as long as you're not getting surprised by your taxes, and I'll wrap up with this, a big mistake that we made is, in the beginning, we didn't prepay taxes and we didn't set aside money for taxes. And so we would get shocked by these big, huge tax bills. But if you are setting aside money on a weekly, monthly basis for taxes, then when that tax bill comes, the money is already paid for. So when it's the end of the year and you're looking at a potential tax bill, you're not worried about it because you already have the money set aside. And so you can make decisions that are best for the business and not decisions that are attempting to avoid tax. I hope this video helps someone out there. I hope it prevents somebody from making a big, huge purchase that they may eventually regret. Just because you are able to buy a piece of equipment and avoid taxes doesn't mean that you're going to actually be able to utilize that equipment. Beware. That's all I want to say. Buyer, beware. Whenever you're thinking about making a decision like this, and the sole motivation is to avoid taxes, just think through it a little bit, look through your numbers, because I've never experienced any huge financial difficulty in our private practice because of too much taxes. But overspending is a bigger danger in my personal opinion than paying too many taxes. So just make sure that you're making sound decisions and don't necessarily take the advice of an accountant or a business manager who doesn't know the detailed ins and outs of your private practice.
What other specific topics related to the business of private practice management would you like for us to cover? Please share in the comments below or reach out to us on social media or our email address, DermBiz@gmail.com. Our mission is to create a movement of collaboration and support amongst physician-owned private practice owners. If you would like to join that movement, again, don't forget to like, share, comment, and please don't forget to subscribe.